And I can tell you, me being a part of this industry for 27 years, back in the old days, when those guys, when we met, it was a cussing, pissing match, fighting and screaming and cussing one another and threatening to beat you up. It was physical sometimes, okay? Because we were all about holding each other accountable. And I think that's what we understand, how valuable that is in holding each other accountable and working together to make products safe.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 220. John LOUK, the TMA sticker on my tree stand. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Covert Scouting Cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. Morse's Sporting Goods, a full line of sporting goods without the sales tax. And Big Buck merch for only $19.99. You can get a cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirt and show support for this podcast by visiting www.bigbukregistry.com/MERCH. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Adam Hayes from Team 200 and themoonguide.com, and you're about to push play on one of my favorite podcasts, Big Buck Registry.
This is Art Helen from Art Helen Outdoors, Dodgeville, Wisconsin. Get ready to listen to another amazing interview, the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi, this is Ben Rising with Whitetail Edge. Sit tight because you're about to listen to the best podcast that you possibly can listen to, the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to jay@bigbukregistry.com. If you've shopped for a tree stand between 1996 and now, you may have noticed a sticker on the box or on the tree stand with the initials TMA. It seems to be attached to everything we buy relative to climbing trees these days. But what the heck does it mean? So we decided to look into it a little further. Climbing a tree prior to 1996 really wasn't all that safe. It was probably safer than the wooden tree stands that our fathers and grandfathers built. Even with the advancements, there were no safety standards for tree stand manufacturers to follow, other than the fear that the Consumer Product Safety Commission would come knocking on your door, and certainly there was no accountability regarding tree stand industry standards. In a room and a voluntary meeting at a trade show in Atlanta, Georgia in 1995, a group of tree stand manufacturers gathered to build a new set of standards specific to a niche group of products that only a niche group of people understand, called tree stands. In the beginning, it wasn't as smooth as you might think, but it certainly changed the industry forever, made it safer, and ultimately made it more enjoyable and effective for the hunter. And that TMA sticker, it means a heck of a lot more than meets the eye. So we reached out to John LOUK. John LOUK was appointed in 2002 as the executive director of the TMA, and he still holds that position. John says that from when the original group met in 1995, they started with 8 tree stand manufacturing standards, which has now grown to 12. We'll turn to our interview with John LOUK in just a moment, but before we do, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week. Deer from Montcalm County is likely Michigan's 10th with chronic wasting disease. This story is from the MLive.com website and was reported by Brandon Champion. A female deer taken during Michigan's youth deer hunting season has been diagnosed with chronic wasting disease. According to the Department of Natural Resources, the 3.5-year-old animal taken in Montcalm County is likely to be the 10th free-ranging deer in the state found to have CWD. Preliminary tests indicate the deer from Montcalm County may be positive, but the DNR is awaiting final confirmation from the Michigan State University Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory. The young hunter who killed the deer voluntarily took the animal to a DNR deer check station and submitted the animal for testing. We cannot thank this family enough for bringing their deer to a check station, said Dr. Kelly Straka, DNR state wildlife veterinarian, in a statement. Without their effort, the disease may have gone undetected in this area. We encourage hunters from any part of the state, especially the south central lower peninsula, to have their deer tested. Some CWD-infected animals will display abnormal behaviors, progressive weight loss, and physical debilitation. However, deer can be infected for many years without showing internal or external symptoms. There is no cure. Once a deer is infected with CWD, it will die. The DNR has actively searched for CWD since May of 2015. To date, more than 14,000 deer have been tested. 9 cases of CWD have been confirmed, all in Ingham and Clinton counties. Terrified deer hit by car takes refuge in dress shop. This story is from the New York Post website and was reported by Linda Massarella. A frantic young male deer that had been hit by a car in Staten Island on Monday afternoon dashed into a dress shop and was trapped inside, bleeding until cops finally tranquilized the animal an hour later, according to the surveillance video and the store's owner. The poor guy was really panicked. He was running in circles because he was trapped. Cavuoto told the Post that the buck came into the open door of his shop around 2 p.m. and his wife Margaret called 911. He was a young guy with small horns just starting to grow, and I heard he'd been hit by a car just outside. During the 60 minutes that the injured buck was trapped, videos showed him running in circles and bumping up against the walls and mirrors, leaving large trails of blood. Cavuoto said that when animal control arrived, the deer was tranquilized, roped up, and taken away on a stretcher. Police did not immediately return comment on the condition of the animal or where it was taken. This article did not mention if the young buck showed any signs of a vasectomy, as we reported in previous stories on Staten Island. Rabid deer attacks man, hooking his face with antlers. This story is from the U.S. News and World Report website. A man says he was attacked by a rabid deer in upstate New York, and it nearly stabbed him in the eye with its antlers. 34-year-old Tony Remillard of Troy was in his backyard Tuesday when the 10-point buck jumped his fence and attacked him. The Albany Union-Times reports the encounter left Remillard with a black eye and a facial gash that required 8 stitches to close. Remillard says he's grateful the blow from the deer's antlers wasn't higher, as it would have punctured his eye. Remillard says he was able to escape when a neighbor drove up. The deer also ran off and was later found dead by the State Department of Environmental and Conservation officer. A DEC spokesman says the deer carcass tested positive for rabies. Rabid deer confirmed in North Carolina. This story is from Wide Open Spaces website and was reported by Jake Vandelar. Deer in North Carolina have managed to contract rabies. The Wildlife Resource Commission has confirmed a deer in Cherokee. The disease is very rare in deer. We're not certain how it was contracted, Commission spokeswoman Fairleigh Milam said. It's possible that it might have been eating a pile of corn and was bitten by a rabid raccoon. Rabies has to be contracted by saliva, but we don't know for sure. The Wildlife Commission has received multiple reports of deer dying, unable to stand, fearless of humans, and losing coordination. Deer afflicted with rabies, epizootic hemorrhagic disease, or chronic wasting disease can exhibit all of these symptoms. Biologists sent tissue samples from several afflicted deer for lab testing. The Southeastern Cooperative Wildlife Disease Study tested and confirmed the rabies. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller with the Deer News. Without further ado, here is John LOUK. John LOUK, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Good, great. Glad to be with you.
I'm psyched to hear, man. This topic today that we're going to discuss in detail has been a bit of a mystery, and I'd like some clarification. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that recognize the TMA logo, or not even logo, just the sticker on a lot of the tree stands. I'd like to clarify what that's all about, because I don't think we truly understand a lot of what's going on behind the TMA sticker. So that's why I brought you on. Who are you, John?
Well, again, I'm the executive director of TMA. I've been the executive director for 17 years, the only one, the first and only. But back in 1995, a group of manufacturers met at a trade show, and we felt like that it was important enough to begin to discuss industry standards for tree stands. So that's what we did. In the name of safety, we actually began to develop standards for tree stands. Test standards. And so from that time, we have expanded those standards from the original 8 to a total of 12 now. So over the years, members have developed performance standards for tree stands. That includes review of instructions, warning labels, safety devices like harnesses, videos, all the standards, and of course there are test standards for the different types of tree stands.
Okay.
But the one thing that I think is misunderstood most is what TMA's role in that testing process is.
Right.
We don't actually do testing. We have never tested tree stands. I'm a single employee. I work out of my home. So the members, the manufacturers, agree when they become members that they're going to have their product tested by a third-party independent testing firm. And we do that because it's important for the manufacturer to have privacy. If there's a failure, we don't even know about it. Okay, the third-party testing firm communicates with that manufacturer, and they make the changes that are necessary because of the test.
Okay.
If they pass the test, the physical test, they also have to do an instruction review, warnings review, quality assurance review. All of that is included in our standards. So a member, which is not necessarily required, you don't have to be a member of TMA to sell tree stands in America. Okay, so we're not one of those, you have to join TMA and you have to have your products tested by an independent testing firm to meet the standards. So that's important to understand that. Products that are not listed on TMA's website could be a good product. It doesn't mean that it's unsafe. What it does mean, though, to the consumer, if it's not listed on TMA's website, more than likely they probably do not include a harness. They might not include the specific warnings and instructions, the best practices that we follow as an industry. So that's kind of some of the differences in the manufacturers that are members of TMA and those that are not members of TMA.
Okay. So there's some that, so if you buy a tree stand today, you don't have to buy one that has a TMA sticker. There's no industry standard that said it has to have that sticker on it. And you can buy them with and without the industry standard.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the one role that we don't play that I think there is a governing body. Consumers need to know this. In Washington, D.C., the president approves and appoints 3 commissioners that form the Consumer Product Safety Commission, okay? That Consumer Product Safety Commission does regulate recreational products such as tree stands. So even though we're not the regulatory body, the CPSA looks at us and works with us to address concerns that might be brought to their attention. Over the years, we have worked with Consumer Product Safety Commission on developing industry standards that will make a product safer, okay?
Okay.
Now, if there's an issue with a product, whether they're a TMA member or not, the benefit of being a TMA member is we support that manufacturer. We would do everything that we could, like list the recall, allow them the opportunity to work with a testing firm to have the product retested and certified to the current standards, work through the issues, whereas a non-member, well, if they call me, I'm going to have a conversation with them, but I'm really not obligated to help them. There's no assistance with TMA to a non-member, okay?
Okay.
The same with a CPSC. If a CPSC person contacts a manufacturer that's not a member of TMA, the first thing they're going to tell them is, are you compliant with industry standards?
What is CPSC?
the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Gotcha. Okay.
And again, top level, they are responsible for every recreational product and two, toys, paint, consumer. If it's a consumable good and it's not industrial, then it falls under Consumer Product Safety Commission. So, and we have worked with them in the past to a point to where when there's an issue and we find it, we work with the manufacturer if they're a member. If they're a non-member, the CPSC basically they just hold that manufacturer accountable directly. You don't want to be in a position with CPSC where you don't meet industry standards. They could shut you down.
Gotcha. All right. So the industry standards that have been developed were developed by TMA, and those standards were recommendations.
That they are strictly something that a manufacturer is responsible for.
Okay.
So but it affects the consumer in that the instructions and warnings included do affect the consumer.
Okay.
So, for instance, let me give you a good example. The most notable requirement we adopted in 2004, requiring every tree stand to include a harness. Okay?
Okay.
That came from a direct communication with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They basically said they came to us as a trade association because we represent about 95% of all tree stands sold and manufactured in the United States.
Okay.
Large numbers. So they came to us and said, we have an issue with fall arrest systems. You're allowing belts and chest harnesses. We don't approve of that. We would like to work with you to develop a requirement for full body harnesses. So we embraced it. Over a couple of years, we did adopt a full body harness standard. So not only did we require the inclusion of a full body harness, we also developed a test method for having that fall arrest system tested. Okay?
Gotcha.
So again, very unique to tree stands. Very unique to tree stands. Not, again, we're not OSHA ANSI, okay? But we always have a tree stand and a tree incorporated into our use of a harness, not as OSHA ANSI, okay? And that's really the big difference with TMA members versus non-members.
Okay, gotcha. You said that there were 8 performance standards originally, and now you have 12. Can we review those 12 standards?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Every standard that we have is specific to a particular, it's either a test method or a practice, okay? The first one, and let me say what's really important. In 2015, we began to see that we were not having peer reviews outside of tree stand manufacturers. So since 2001, we have had TMS, I'm going to say TMS for brief, Tree Stand Manufacturing Standards, that were approved by TMA members. We've had those reviewed by American Society for Material Testing, ASTM, okay? Testing materials. American Society for Material Testing. ASTM is a international organization where they have peer review and they have to reach a 100% consensus before a standard is passed or adopted.
Okay.
So all of our standards now and have been since 2001 approved and adopted by ASTM. That is a real important fact. But since 2016, we now require members to meet ASTM standards, not TMS standards. We no longer publish TMS standards. Okay?
Gotcha. Okay.
That's really important because now anyone, a consumer, a person that works for the Consumer Product Safety Commission, someone who has experience in tree stand accidents, they can work on the committee. So anyone can actually serve and be a part of developing the standards now versus prior to 2016, it was pretty much all manufacturers.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Very good.
So all of these standards are either practice or test method.
Okay.
The first one lists, in the F2120 list the testing protocol for load capacity. That's a boring standard, but it's important that it be listed. The different protocols, testing protocols for every product.
Okay.
The second one, 2121, is a labels. So there's a specific requirement per this standard that every tree stand and harness have to comply with labels. Okay.
Okay.
Then 2122 is tree stand safety device. For instance, it lists that with every tree stand, you have to include a full body harness. More specifically, it states that with fixed position stands, you have to have a harness that includes a lineman's belt. Okay. So it's those kind of things. It requires, for instance, with a climber, that you have a connector. Okay.
Mm-hmm. With
a full body harness, it's another good example. That standard requires that the full body harness include a suspension relief device. Okay, it's very specific.
Gotcha.
It's a minimum. Now, some manufacturers include more, but they have to at least include this. This is probably one of the key standards that separates TMA members from non-TMA members. Okay, when you get your tree stand from a non-TMA member,
yep,
they're probably not going to have a suspension relief device. They're probably not going to have a video included with their instructions. Okay. They're probably not going to have specific warnings related to weight capacity, for instance. They're probably going to sell you a ladder that doesn't have stabilizing bars and crisscross straps. All of those are things that are specified in the standard, okay?
Gotcha.
Instructions, real biggie. That's 2123. All best practices. Everything that we teach in education is covered in 2123. That's why it's important for the consumer. This is where we touch the consumer. When a manufacturer has an instruction manual that's 20 pages long, it's intentional because we want to teach the consumer. We require the manufacturer to include specific best practices to promote safety. That's really an important part of the whole entire safe use model.
Yep.
Is reading instructions. Okay. So that's really important. And then another one is 2124, where it starts getting into testing the load capacity, how important it is to actually, when a manufacturer establishes a rated load, the test is performed based on what the manufacturer set. So TMA, or the standard, doesn't tell a manufacturer what their rated load is. They set it, and then the third-party testing firm tests according to what that rated load is. Some of the tests are done at 1 times, some at 2 times the safety factor, some at 1.5 times. The seat is tested 1.5 times. The platform is tested twice the rated load. Now, repetitive load, that's specified here too. It's all based on the weight capacity that the manufacturer sets. TMA doesn't set that, okay? The standard does not set that.
Okay. So
we also have a test for static stability and adherence, okay? Really important, obviously, for a climber, ladder, fixed position, and climbing aids or stick ladders. They have to be able to be stable and adhere to the tree, okay?
Right. Makes sense.
All right, so you got a static load capacity, you got repetitive load capacity. I'm going to just be quick about it. Quality assurance program is really important. Obviously, a manufacturer has to be able to put on paper how they're going to maintain their quality assurance, okay? They build thousands and thousands of products. Well, they refer to their quality assurance program in maintaining that quality. So every manufacturer has to have a quality assurance program in place that they hold themselves accountable for, how they produce it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then a biggie for us is 2337. That's the testing for fall arrest systems. Again, what's unique about tree stands is the tree. What's unique about tree stand fall arrest systems, not like OSHA ANSI, is that you have a user that is not employed. This is really important. People get confused about, well, why can't I wear an OSHA-approved harness for tree stands? Well, OSHA says as an employee, you have to wear it. The employer tells you if you don't wear it, you're fired, right?
Right.
We cannot tell a consumer they have to wear, or we can't hold them accountable if they choose not to wear a harness. So that's why we have established the requirement for every tree stand sold to include a full body harness for tree stand. And so this particular test confirms that it meets the standard for use for tree stand. It includes a suspension relief device. It includes what we call a maximum rest force test, where the limit of the distance of fall has to maintain a certain shock load on the body. People don't understand, when we require a harness to be installed at eye level or above, no slack when seated, what that does is that reduces the distance they will fall. Why is that important? Well, with a tree stand, if you're hunting along in a remote area, you got to be able to get back in that stand, right?
Right.
So if you don't have your tether, eye level or above, no slack in tether when seated, you fall too far, you can't get back in it, and you hang there and die, okay?
Right.
So that's why all of these things are in place to prevent or reduce injury to the hunter.
Gotcha.
A few more of the standards. We test the standard for seats. We have a standard for seats.
Mm-hmm.
And the latest was actually published in 2016, is a specification standard, which actually encompasses all of the standards. The way the standards were written in the past, you had to reference, or the standards referenced other tests. So the specification standard combined all of those tests into one document. So it's much easier for the testing firm and the manufacturer to see what requirements are set for them.
Okay.
So that's basically all of the standards. And again, we do not have publication rights for ASTM standards. If someone wanted to purchase a copy of an ASTM standard, they would need to buy that directly from ASTM.
Gotcha. All right. So there's a bunch of different forces at play here. You have TMA, which is a group that got together to come up with some standards that each manufacturer should live up to in order to meet and be a part of TMA. But
correct,
there's also the consumer protection part of the government that is more about the regulatory aspects, and you work in conjunction with them to set those standards.
There are times when the Consumer Product Safety Commission calls me up or sends me an email where I would have a conversation with them about a certain particular concern that they have.
Okay. And then the ASTM, the American Society for Testing Materials.
Yep.
That's a whole separate entity.
Absolutely. They're out of Pennsylvania, or their headquarters is somewhere up north. I forget where it is, but they're international. They have over 30,000 members with over 12,000 standards. So it's significantly broader than just the tree stand manufacturers.
Okay. And are they government based, or are they independent and they give recommendations to government?
They're independent. However, the CPSC does not recognize trade association standards. We had to, part of our position with CPSC is they only recognize ASTM standards. So again, one of the motivations we had back in 2001 to get our standards approved through ASTM was that CPSC does not recognize industry standards unless they went through that peer review through the ASTM.
Gotcha. All right. And does the ASTM have their own tree stand division where they're doing? How does that work?
In 2015, as the executive director, the board requested that tree stands fell under the archery subcommittee. Okay, FO816.
And this is
the archery subcommittee.
An archery subcommittee, and this is part of the ASTM archery subcommittee. Okay.
Right. So the archery subcommittee took the tree stand standards and they adopted them in conjunction with all of the archery standards for bows and arrows and overdraws. All of that is under FO816. Well, in 2015, our board felt like it was important for us as a tree stand industry to form our own subcommittee. So we did that, and now I am the chairman of that new committee, the FO8.18, and it is specifically to tree stands. We don't have to be concerned with archery, okay? They don't have to be concerned with tree stands. So we separated in 16, and I've been the chairman of that subcommittee since then.
Okay.
So we only talk about tree stand standards when we meet.
Gotcha. All right. So you're not only, it's quite complex, really, if you break it down, in a sense. Yet what you're attempting to do is to make the industry safer.
Absolutely.
The TMA is sounds like it's a collaboration of manufacturers trying to set standards and recommendations to the ASTM through committees, subcommittees, so that the Consumer Products Safety Commission can, in turn, regulate recommendations that come through the ASTM.
Correct.
That's the circle.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And understand how important it is for manufacturers not to necessarily control that ASTM process. And I think this is really important about ASTM. As a chairman, I have to balance the committee. So at no one time can there be more than 50% manufacturers. There has to be 50% general interest users, okay, on that committee. So it is possible for the general interest and user to control what manufacturers do, okay? The other thing that sets ASTM apart is it is 100% affirmative vote, meaning if one negative vote comes in, the chairman and or the committee has to address that negative vote before that standard is published. That is a very significant challenge. For instance, under TMA, I could get a standard passed within 6 months. With ASTM, it typically takes up to 2 years to have a standard published. Much more detail.
Okay. All right. So the first group was what again?
ASTM.
The ASTM.
FO816 was the archery subcommittee.
Okay.
And then we formed our own subcommittee, FO8.18, for tree stand.
Gotcha. Okay. So ASTM takes a couple years.
Yes. Before we only recognize ASTM standards, we would cast ballots for tree stand manufacturers, and they had to approve a standard by 80%.
Okay.
So it was easier, much easier for a small group of manufacturers. You're talking 20 or 30 manufacturers versus, there's 33 members right now currently on our subcommittee that only at any given time there can only be, say, 13 or 14 manufacturers. So it's much more difficult to have a standard published and approved through ASTM versus TMA.
Okay. Let me go through these acronyms again, because there's a lot of acronyms being thrown around. I want to make sure that everybody listening to this understands what's what. TMA stands for Tree Stand Manufacturers Association.
Correct.
ASTM is
American Society for Testing Materials.
Okay. Where's that it?
Member certification report is what I received. That's what we call an MCR, where the member and the testing firm report to me what products are compliant, what have been tested, and their instructions have been reviewed, their warning labels, their quality assurance has been reviewed. I receive what I call a member certification report.
Okay.
That's what I use to list over 600, 700 products on TMA's website. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
I get a report from the member and the testing firm to be able to list products for consumers to be able to go to our website and see what products are currently meeting industry standards.
Okay. All right. So and you have your committees and subcommittees to the ASTM. Got it. So going back to the third-party independent testing, TMA sets the standard or the things that should be researched. Are there specific standards that have to be met, or that let me put it this way. You're not making them meet these standards. You're making suggestions on what standards need to be tested. And then
if the manufacturer is a member of TMA,
okay,
in order for them to maintain a membership in good standing, they have to have all of their products meet industry standards before entering the stream of commerce. meaning if a consumer goes to our website and looks at that website and does not find their product listed on that website, that means that that product has not been tested by an independent testing firm and more than likely does not meet these industry standards.
Gotcha. Okay.
Not saying it's unsafe, okay?
There's a difference. I understand that. There is a difference between industry standards and unsafe.
But when it's listed on TMA's website, that is a significant undertaking. That manufacturer is held accountable to the industry standards, those ASTM standards. That is significant.
Okay.
Now, you referenced, this is a good point, too. We started to talk about these independent testing firms.
Yes.
Well, they're not just Joe Blow in the back, okay? These, since 2016, when we adopted ASTM standards, we also required that these third-party testing firms be an ISO 17025 accredited, meaning, real simple, that testing firm has to hire and pay for an accreditation company to come in and physically do an audit on whether or not they are testing according to that group of ASTM standards that we talked about.
Gotcha. All right.
Usually takes them about 6 months to achieve accreditation, and it costs about $10,000 to have that auditing firm come in and do an audit.
Fascinating. All right. So you've got TMA making recommendations. You've got ASTM, the backing of the TMA.
Right.
Then you've got the Consumer Product Commission that is overseeing the regulatory part. Then you've got the third parties that test the products to the specifications that you set down. And in order to be able to test that, there has to show certification that they've been audited by an ISO.
Correct.
Fascinating. So there are many safety, and you're testing safety, and there are safety requirements and third parties upon third parties, making sure that what you're testing are legit. So you've removed all the potential. It sounds like you've removed.
Well, and again, what we are intentionally doing is establishing credibility. Okay, people that when they see a TMA label, it's not really a label; it's a trademark. Okay, that we control. Non-members are not authorized to use TMA in any form or fashion in their marketing. That is very significant, okay, because it is a registered trademark. No one outside of being a member of TMA, because they own that trademark, we control it. This is the other thing. The TMA trademarks, we have three. TMA logo, TMA, and Treestand Manufacturers Association. They're all registered, and we control those. We have to defend those. A non-member or a member that is misusing the trademark, I'm responsible for sending out cease and desist letters.
Okay.
So non-manufacturers or non-members have no authorization to reference TMA in any form or fashion.
Gotcha.
Members that are not in good standing are not authorized to use the trademark.
So in order to use your trademark, I mean, there are many layers of safety protocol that are behind TMA, and that logo, that sticker, that notification. And a violation or a member that's not in good standing, you have to have that legal ability to send cease and desist letters at this point in order to protect the credibility of your logo.
Absolutely. And again, what that means to the consumer, as you've already spoken about.
Right.
Consumers go into a store and they see a TMA label. Well, they think it's certified by TM, but that's not necessarily true. We don't certify. What we do, though, is what I've been explaining to you. All of that is behind and what represents TMA, the testing, the control of the trademark, the protection. Non-members, see, we only have two sources of income, dues and a royalty from the video. So for non-members to be able to use a trademark, well, that's not equity to that member. So we build credibility and equity, the value of TMA for members only.
Gotcha. Fascinating how deep this is and how many third-party verifications are involved.
Well, and I'll explain it this way. It's pretty easy for us to understand the importance of the fox not guarding the hen house. Okay?
Right.
The consumer needs to understand it is not a bunch of manufacturers protecting their own interest. Quite the contrary. TMA is about holding each other accountable for what they produce. That is very significant. And I can tell you, me being a part of this industry for 27 years, back in the old days, when those guys, when we met, it was a cussing, pissing match. Literally.
I bet.
Fighting and screaming and cussing one another and threatening to beat you up. It was physical sometimes, okay? Because we were all about holding each other accountable. And I think that's what we understand as members of TMA, how valuable that is in holding each other accountable and working together to make products safe, okay? Make products safe.
Makes sense. I mean, if we think back prior to these standards being in place, I think even a lot of the products that many of us use prior to, was it 96 is when you guys got together?
Yes, 96.
Prior to 96, climbing a tree was scary.
Very scary, yep.
Right? You took your life in your own hands. These days, I just started climbing again, and I've noticed a vast difference between the 90s, the 2000s, and now where we are today, between what's available, what comes with your tree stands, and how much safer it feels to climb based off of the products that I'm buying. It's fascinating. Like I've now engaged in climbing again because everything that's available to us today is far safer than it used to be. And I stopped climbing because I had kids, and I was.
Well, I can say this: it's true. It's true, Jay, that if the TMA had not stepped up and started working together for testing, for standards, for promoting safety, I don't believe there would be a tree stand industry as we know it.
Right. I agree. I completely agree with that statement. There's no way it could exist. It would still be flopping around, I guess is a good way to say it.
It would be. It would be out of business because the truth of the matter, we never are going to avoid litigation. Mm-hmm. So the point I want to make about litigation, there are tree stands out there that are unsafe. Mm-hmm. There are a lot more misuses by consumers, hunters, who don't understand the value of what we've just talked about. Okay, right. They misuse the product. They leave it in the woods an extended period of time. They don't wear a harness, and that's what we're all about. There needs to be not only standards, but there needs to be a strong message to encourage safety.
Right.
And that's what we do. That's our core value, is promoting tree stand safety.
I've noticed this. Like, I feel safe climbing because I have the harness, the nice harness, the harness that's easy to put on. It's solid. It's rated to my weight capacity. The ladder sticks. They all have the TMA logo on it. The tree stand that I'm hanging, the safety video that comes with it, the relief strap that comes with every harness that I notice, mm-hmm. the lifelines, the access to all this stuff, including the lineman's belt. Yes, you could have made your own lineman's belt, but there are so many different safety features now that are absolutely affordable and readily available that climbing has been a joy. I used to love to climb, and I stopped for a while, 10 years or so. I've just started climbing again, and I am falling in love with climbing again because the safety standards are there. It's noticeable.
And I'll say this, you mentioned we call them aftermarket harnesses, those that have pockets and quick connect mm-hmm. straps, have camouflage. They're really nice.
Yep.
We believe our position on including a full body harness with every tree stand supports the aftermarket industry.
Right.
Because if you get that OEM harness, we call them OEM harnesses, the ones that come with your tree stand, you're going to quickly recognize how inconvenient it is.
Yes.
But it's much more difficult to put on. It's confusing.
Absolutely.
But that aftermarket harness, we believe, and this is, I have good friends in this industry that sell aftermarket harnesses, and they take offense when another manufacturer gets in the market. I don't, because I believe, my theory behind that, if a hunter spends money to to buy a harness, more than likely they're going to justify wearing it and it being attached. So, I mean, it's like a rifle you spend $1,000 on. Well, if you pay $300 for a rifle, you're going to use it. But if you pay $1,000 for it, you're going to justify using it more.
Absolutely. Absolutely you will. No question about it.
And the more we get people using their harnesses, the safer everybody's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, and that brings up a point. We're still seeing trends. Falls from tree stands are overtaking accidents with firearms.
Right.
Most states are now reporting more tree stand accidents, more falls from tree stands than there are firearm accidents. Where we have a problem with statistics, and this is where we challenge with CPSC, they're saying there's 6,700 tree stand accidents a year. They're estimating that, okay? And we see the old 1 in 3 that deer hunting. So all these statistics, what they're not telling you about those statistics is that when you drill down to it, state agencies are not required to investigate tree stand accidents. They're required to investigate firearm accidents. Well, why is that important, Jay? How are we going to know how to teach to prevent tree stand accidents if officers are not going in the field and investigating?
Right.
You can only assume why these accidents are happening.
That's right.
What we do know, though, here's the reality. If you're wearing a harness that's connected to a tree, we're never going to hear about that because they're not hitting the ground. They're not being injured.
Right.
So that is our position. We believe every tree stand action should be reported and also investigated so that we can glean the true facts about what are causing the accidents so we can address it in education. In standards, we might require, this is a thought, there has been discussion about requiring including lifelines, okay?
Yep.
These 30-foot Prusik knots and ropes with every fixed position and every ladder because it requires them to be connected from the ground till they're back down. Well, here's my point on that. I don't think it'll ever become an industry standard. Why? Because they're not wearing their harnesses now. What good is a 30-foot rope if they're not wearing their harness?
That's a good point.
I mean,
you need both.
Can give them 30-foot ropes. They'll use it for a pull rope or worse, to get out of a bog. They won't use it because why do they need a 30-foot rope if they're not using their harness?
That's right. Very good point. I wanted to go through some of the things that I'm finding on your website, and a couple things I think are very key to consumers buying products. Before we get there, I wanted to go through the standards that get set for which types of products. And it sounds like you do tree stands of all varieties, hang-ons, climbers, ladder stands, and correct me if I'm wrong along these ways. You set standards.
Absolutely.
Okay. Set standards for ladders, ladder sticks, climbing sticks, set standards for harnesses, carabiners that go with the harnesses.
Well, we don't test components, okay? The tests are performance standards for systems,
okay,
not individual components.
Okay. So when you say systems, you mean?
As it was intended to be used. For instance, you could not test a climber, okay? So there's a test for the seat and there's a test for the platform.
Okay.
A ladder, there's a test for the platform and there's a test for the seat, but it's as installed. We don't test, say, like a stabilizer bar in and by itself because it's a component of a system.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say the harnesses. Are there standards set for the harnesses themselves?
Yes. Okay. Harnesses are one of those, we call them components, that are separated from the tree stand.
Okay.
So that's why we have certain tests for the individual fall arrest system.
Okay.
Yes.
What about the climbing sticks? Or,
yes,
like, for example,
there are standards for climbing sticks. Okay. Now, they're the same test or similar test as the climber and ladder.
Okay.
And they're similar in that there's a repetitive load test. There's a test for the steps.
Okay. Are there tests that are or standards set for not just the harness, or maybe this piece is part of the harness, the safety strap that is installed once you get to the top of the stand?
No.
Okay.
It is tested again as a system.
Okay.
Okay. As intended to be used.
Okay. The lifelines, the lineman's belts, Are there standards?
Lifelines, there are no industry standards for lifelines right now, currently. We are actually working on a standard for lifelines.
Okay.
But for climbing belts, there is a test method to test a climbing belt.
Okay. All right. Fascinating. Okay. Now, what is the protocol for a manufacturer to issue a recall?
When again, when a manufacturer calls me and has a discussion about a possible recall, I automatically recommend that they contact legal counsel and also simultaneously immediately contact the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Okay.
That is a very scary procedure, okay? But here's the point. CPSC has made it very clear to us as a trade association.
Mm-hmm.
It is between CPSC and the manufacturer, not TMA, okay?
Okay.
We're concerned. We would support the manufacturer by listing the recall.
Right.
But until there's an agreement between the manufacturer and the CPSC on what that recall needs to state,
Mm-hmm.
we stay out of the way.
Okay.
So all the recalls you see on our website,
Mm-hmm.
they're really only about 13, even though it encompasses 4 or 5 different companies with various products. There's only really 10 or so recalls.
Right.
And those recalls, if you click on one of those recalls on our website, it goes directly to the Consumer Product Safety Commission notice.
Right.
So unless the notice is published by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, we do not publish it on our website. That's really important.
Gotcha. All right. So if it hits the Consumer Product Safety Commission, then you'll post it on your site.
Correct.
All right. And a lot of these recalls are old. Like
They're old, and again, what I do is I remove those recalls on our website when a manufacturer tells me I'm supposed to.
Okay.
Unless they tell me it has been closed, I leave it up.
Okay.
It only benefits them, okay? For instance, Strong Built. This is an interesting conversation. That brings up a point. I probably need to remove that Strong Built recall. Why?
Okay.
Strong Built is no longer a member of TMA.
Aha.
Neither is Gander Mountain. They went out of business, as you know.
Right.
So that right there, because they're no longer a member, it's not to our best interest to represent a non-member. Follow me?
Totally.
So that I need to remove that. That's a good example of something that I need to do today.
Okay.
Now, that recall is still out there, okay? But the consumer cannot go to TMA's website and see that recall. They would have to go to the Consumer Product Safety Commission website.
Right.
It's still there, still published, but it's not going to be on TMA's website after the day.
Okay. So it sounds like as a consumer, if I'm interested to figure out whether the tree stand I bought is part of a recall, you really need to check both places. You need to go to
Absolutely.
TMA and the Consumer Product Safety Commission to
Correct.
see if what you're buying is safe or not.
Correct.
Or even, I can't even say it's going to be safe if there's been a recall or not.
Recall. And some of these products, they were very, very small, okay? And a majority of them are old, really, are old.
Right. Yes. A lot of them are old, like dating back to 2 years ago.
And some go even further back than that.
Right. All right. Now, you have members that are part of the TMA. They're all listed at the bottom of your site. I don't know if they're more than what scroll.
If you look at who we are under About TMA,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see a complete list real time.
Okay.
That's a list: manufacturing class, professional services class, retail buyer class, and supporting members.
Okay. So that gives you everybody that's involved in this product.
As of today.
All right. Now, the other thing as a consumer that I would be interested in, aside from going to the Consumer Product Safety Commission website to find out if what I bought has been recalled or not, is you mentioned that the products that have made it through a review process, which I assume is the review through the ASTM.
Well, it's that third-party testing firm.
Okay. The third-party testing firm has tested it based off of the standards that the manufacturer sets, if I'm not
ASTM.
ASTM, yep.
Yep.
So the manufacturer, the ASTM sets the standards, or the manufacturer sets what they need to test for?
ASTM establishes the industry standards.
Okay. And in turn, that manufacturer looks at the ASTM standards, much of which came from the TMA's recommendations.
Right.
And says, okay, here's our new stand. I need to put it through the process. Here are the I needed to test it to this standard.
All applicable standards for that particular type of tree stand, it meets it.
Okay. Then once, let's say it passes, or if it doesn't pass, either way, if it does pass, it gets listed as a product of your member on your website.
Correct.
And if it's not there, is it safe to assume that it has not passed through a third-party test yet?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If a member chooses, I don't know why they would not choose to report a product that's been tested, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But they could. If it fails, okay, or, for instance, they withdrew it. Now, you could buy a tree stand that's not listed on TMA's website. That doesn't necessarily mean that it hadn't been tested.
Okay.
Okay? What I tell people is, look, go to our website. It's the most significant listing of products that have been tested and reported to me. If it's not listed, then I would say if the manufacturer is still in business, that consumer needs to call that manufacturer directly and inquire.
Okay. Because there's a stand, for example, real life situation. I'm looking at a particular stand right now. I don't see in the product description a TMA stamp, so to speak, and I don't see it on your website.
And again, what is difficult? This is a challenge. And again, I try to encourage manufacturers when they report a product to me on that MCR that it be recognizable to the consumer. Okay? So a model number specific to a manufacturer is not necessarily the same number in how it's marketed. So there is a disconnect there.
Mm.
When I catch one, I basically tell a manufacturer, this is the way it should be listed. Okay, I'm going to give you a good example. There's a lot of private label tree stands. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Private label.
Yep.
Let's talk about private label. That means a manufacturer manufactures it for a particular retailer, and they have it a specific name for that, like Field and Stream, like NO Power does a private label for Academy called Big Game Winner. Okay.
Yep.
Primal Vantage has private label under Ameristep. Okay. Field and Stream. Those are just two. So if you would go to TMA's website and you might not see a brand named Game Winner, you wouldn't. Okay. So because I know it's listed under NO Power, which if you bought the tree stand, this is interesting. If you bought the tree stand, it would have NO Power listed as the manufacturer. Okay.
Right.
So I would know to put Game Winner on TMA's website, and you would have to continue to look for Game Winner products on the TMA website to be able to see if it was listed. We've got to improve that, and I've had some conversations with these what we call private label manufacturers
Mm-hmm.
to see if we can't create a listing of private label tree stands. It would be much easier if we did that. Okay.
Yep.
So we've discussed it. The board hasn't really come to a consensus on it yet, but I think at some point in time you're going to see the way it's branded, the way it's marketed to the consumer is probably how we're going to list it on the TMA website.
Okay.
Going forward. There are some Game Winner products listed under NO Power, okay? Because I've had this conversation with NO Power, I can list Game Winner. I've had this conversation with Academy, okay? They want their product to be distinguished on the TMA website. Academy wants their product, Game Winner, to be listed on the website.
Right. Like, for example, if I go down and I choose a member, I'm looking for Gorilla in the list. Gorilla I see as a member, but I don't see any Gorilla listing in the choose a member category to pick from.
All right, so here is their official corporation name.
Okay.
Is Free Reign, okay?
Got it.
Several years ago, they actually reorganized from Eastman Gorilla tree stands to Free Reign.
Gotcha.
So all of Gorilla Gear products, they don't sell tree stands anymore, but the Free Reign brand, or let's say the Gorilla Gear brand, is listed under Free Reign.
Okay.
There's a good example, okay? We should have a Gorilla Gear brand, okay?
Yep.
So the consumer could go to Free Reign. If I just put Gorilla Gear in parentheses, then the consumer would find those Gorilla Gear products.
Gotcha. All right. So that clarifies that. Now,
Yeah.
There's another company on here. I won't mention who they are, but I can see that they're a part of the membership. I pull it down, and there are only 3 products there.
Okay.
But I know for certain that they are using the TMA label on their products that are being sold. Does that mean it just didn't make it to the site, or does that mean that it hasn't?
That would be first a phone call from me.
Okay.
Because our bylaws, here's where we hold our members accountable. Our bylaws clearly state, okay, that once you become a member of TMA, you're responsible for having all products reported to TMA within 12 months. If you are selling it, if you are releasing that product in the stream of commerce, as a TMA member, you have also agreed to have those products compliant and listed on TMA's website.
Gotcha. All right. So you're holding a standard to say that if you're putting this sticker on this product, that you need to have it here listed on our site.
And if it's not, that is an infraction of our bylaws. I would have a conversation with them by phone first. If they did not rectify it promptly, we would put them up for either suspension or expulsion. And we have expelled members for that particular reason.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's a lot to being a member of TMA. We pull the plug on you, you're done. That's actually happened.
And rightfully so. This is a big deal. This is about safety,
deal.
Safety standards.
It's called holding each other accountable.
Right.
And if the manufacturer does not want to be held accountable for what they do or don't do, then they need to withdraw their membership and they need to sell product consumer direct. Okay? That's the way we believe.
Right.
You either work with us or you're against us.
And that makes sense. Now, one last question I had about the function of your website, and then we'll move on. Under some places where it says compliance status, says meets current standards. In some places, the product is listed there, but the compliance status category is blank. What does that mean?
Because there have been changes in the standards, okay? Meets current standards is significant. Some manufacturers choose not to have an old product retested, but still listed, because it was compliant at some point in time.
Okay.
That's why we give that member that prerogative. They decide what they want to list on TMA's website or not, okay?
Yep.
But I could say there are fewer products listed, or let's just say that don't meet current standards versus those that do.
Okay.
But there could be. I'm looking for one of those. What manufacturer was that?
That was under Millennium.
Okay.
They have a ladder stand, 2-person DLR, and a ladder from 2009 to 2010.
So again, here's a particular situation where they have had a change in model number, probably a change in design, and they have not chose to retest an old product. More than likely, you cannot buy that particular model number right now.
Okay.
But they've not maintained their product list. It would be easy for someone from Millennium to send me an email listing the products they wanted to be removed because they no longer sell them. But they don't take the time to do that. So until I get a notice from the member, hey, I'm sorry, I'm going to list it.
Right.
And here that's significant, Jay, because we have what we call a watchdog program. It gets better. Every member understands that when a product is listed on TMA's website, it's also a part of a electronic selection called Watchdog. Every year, our board selects a group of products, and those products are tested. Well, if a product is listed on TMA's website, it's a part of that electronic selection. So instead of having 10 products, they got 20 products. Well, the chances are that they be selected with 20 products versus 10, that's the consequences of keeping products listed on TMA's website that are no longer being sold. We can't buy that product. Jay, what we do is we just substitute a product in place of that.
Right.
But that member, when they list the product on TMA's website, they understand that they're susceptible to watchdog selection. We're going through that right now.
Okay.
We have selected products, and they're being tested as we speak.
Gotcha.
And every year, believe it or not, there are some issues that we address through Watchdog every year.
Have you ever had to send out cease and desist letters?
Yes.
Okay.
More so recalls. Literally, a manufacturer chose under Watchdog in 2004, eventually went out of business because they had a harness that failed Watchdog. They did a recall. The next year they were selected again. It failed again. They refused to do a recall until they got the call from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. See, it was out of our hands then.
Right.
All we did was we selected a product and tested it, and there was dialogue between TMA and the member. But when it got to that level, CPSC took over. That's what put them out of business, literally.
Gotcha.
CPSC will put the hammer down on manufacturers. They do not tolerate products that don't meet industry standards. They don't tolerate.
I would absolutely expect that to happen.
They're like OSHA, okay?
Definitely, right.
They're just like OSHA. They will shut you down.
It is interesting. It's a fascinating subject matter, and it's not talked about much about who's being held to what standards other than the sticker. But I think this is so important to get out to the general public to understand what that means. What does it mean when you buy a TMA stand? It means a lot.
It means a lot. And there is, again, over 20 years of working together as an industry to accomplish the things we are. And I'll say this, we have lots of work to do still. There's, we talked about standards. Standards are live documents. They change every year. We add to them. We take away. We change the standards to meet the needs. A good example, we have research going on right now about whether or not our standard addresses these new tethers that are bungee. Well, the research that we've done shows that our standard doesn't necessarily address bungees. So we're going back, looking at it. I have a task group form that actually now is looking at how we can revise our standard to address these new bungee-type tethers.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, there's 6 manufacturers actually manufacturing a harness that has a bungee-type tether.
Okay.
So it's another trend, not necessarily bad, but it's new technology. So that's what we have to do is we embrace new technology that manufacturers come up with, and we develop a standard specific for that new technology.
Gotcha. Are there any pieces of technology that are out there that you think are industry standard or industry changers that will help people become safer in the tree other than what's out there now?
I say there's at least 2 products that I'm real excited about.
Okay.
One is obviously the selling of what we call Treestand safety ropes. Lifelines is trademarked. Okay, so we as an industry are going to identify it as a Treestand safety rope. Okay.
Yep.
We believe that that's a game changer.
Okay. Good to hear.
Because it allows conveniently attaching to the tree from the time you leave the ground till you back down. It's really significant.
Right. And it's funny you say that because I came to the same conclusion. I agree.
All right. The second thing that I'm really excited about is new technology as it relates to addressing suspension trauma. Okay, that's something we've not talked about.
Right.
But these devices allow the user to safely descend to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they address suspension trauma. It lowers them to the ground. Now, there have been 5 or 6 products since 2009 that have been marketed and sold, but none of them are still in business. Really, I'm just telling you the truth.
Right.
Because the consumer hasn't really justified paying $400 for something in lieu of a harness. Okay?
Right.
But there is one that's being manufactured in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Black Ash Products. Met the owner, him and his wife, very much concerned about safety with tree stands.
Mm-hmm.
He developed this product. Wayne, I forget his last name, but anyway, this product is, I think, the best of every type that's been sold. It is a product that I would recommend using if you don't have the ability to recover or you hunt in remote areas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If you can't physically address suspension trauma, I tell people you need to hunt from the ground. Or another option, I think he's been in business since 2014, you could purchase a descending device that lowers you to the ground. The truth, Jay, is we have an associate that has investigated over 480 tree stand accidents. 480. There is not a recorded incident with a full body harness that resulted in a suspension trauma death.
Really?
Okay?
That's
right.
That means that's a big statement right there.
It's a big statement. But here's the point I'll make. There's not to say that there's not been deaths, but it's been misuse of the product. A good example, I won't use names, but there was an individual who hung in a harness. He got to a point where he couldn't get back in his stand, so he loosened the leg straps. Well, the harness rode up, and the chest strap choked him to death.
Okay.
Well, that was not due to the blood pooling in the leg, suspension trauma. That was due to asphyxiation because the chest strap rose up and choked him to death. Other situations, there's been a total of 14 now, literally. But none of them are from a properly used full body harness. None of them.
Okay.
So, but that doesn't mean, again, I talked about CPSC. That means CPSC says you're going to address self-rescue. So we have, as an industry, we require suspension relief devices, and we require specific warnings that address suspension trauma. But what's encouraging to me is 5 of the products that have been offered are out of business. This one product is still in business, and I believe it has merit. It truly does address suspension trauma like none other. It really is a good product. And for that guy who hunts in a remote area by himself, and he wears a harness, that's key. This suspension descending device is not going to help somebody who don't wear a harness. They got to be connected to the tree.
Right.
Okay?
Right. First and foremost, step one.
First and foremost, it's not cheap, $120, but you can use it multiple times. It's not one shot, you're done. So it is a viable option for that person who truly does hunt remote by themselves. That
is fascinating. Excellent.
They're not members of TMA. We don't have a standard for descending devices currently. And I've encouraged Wayne to be a part of developing that standard. Now, if he's the only one selling it, does he really need to develop an industry standard for it? That's, again, his decision. Thus far, he's not joined TMA and provided me a draft of a standard. I encouraged him to when I met with him a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
But that doesn't mean he will.
What are some of the, and just to finish up here, what are some of the key aspects of safety that people need to be aware of, just as a global bring-home message?
Well, again, I really feel strongly about what I call the big 5, okay? Sure, wearing a harness is critical. No question about it. It's probably the number one thing that a person can do to protect themselves from a fall, okay? But you can prevent a fall if you read your instructions, practice at ground level. That's 2. Read your instructions, practice at ground level, wear your harness and be connected. A really important one is inspecting the tree stand and harness before each use. Really important.
Okay.
And then never hurry. A lot of the incidents we see are a result of people actually hurrying. So I call it the big 5. If you address those big 5, read, practice, wear, inspect, never hurry, you're going to essentially eliminate any fall from a tree stand. Any incident that you might have with a tree stand will be absolutely eliminated.
Good recommendation there. The big 5. Excellent.
And that's on our website too.
Okay. Speaking of websites, where can we find more information if we haven't covered it here today as a listener?
Our website is a wealth of information. I mean, it talks about safety. We have the video links. We even have the discussions we have with the Consumer Product Safety Commission on it.
Okay.
Newsletters talks a little bit about what we do as far as education, what are current events that are going on within TMA, the trainings. We have a grant program for state agencies where we actually pay them to go teach tree stand safety and also tree stand accident investigation. So we have educational funds that we spend annually to teach tree stand safety and to teach tree stand accident investigation.
Very interesting. I didn't know about that. So what is the website, phone number, email, if we wanted to reach out from here?
All right, it's www.tmastands.com.
Okay, so tmastands.com. Okay.
TMAstands.com gets you to our website. The phone number to speak to me is 601-584-7983.
Okay.
And you can reach me by email, info at tmastands.com.
Very good. Well, John, I have to say that this has been an enlightening interview and one that has been long overdue. I should have done this a long time ago to cover safety and the standards that are behind it and what goes into that TMA sticker and logo that you see on a lot of the products that we're buying when we're climbing in and out of stands these days. And I'm very encouraged about some of the products that are in the future, and I really deeply appreciate what the manufacturers did and got together and what you're still doing today to give more safety to the hunters out there that make us safer in the woods.
It's been my pleasure, Jay. And like I said, I do take phone calls from consumers. I can't answer product-specific questions, but I can give you a general answer to your questions. And hey, I know who to talk to with these manufacturers too. So if a consumer does have a question and they can't get a hold of the manufacturer, I can pretty much get a response from the manufacturer.
Okay. All right. Very good. Fascinating talk. Thank you so much for coming on the show, John, and explaining all this stuff. I have a much clearer picture of how this integrated and complicated yet important system works.
Well, been my pleasure again. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you to John LOUK for joining us on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. Absolutely fascinating how in-depth this stuff goes. And now you know what that sticker means. I mean, you see it on every tree stand. You see it on every tree stand box. You see it on lots and lots of different products that have to do with climbing trees as a hunter these days. And now you know. Now you know the rest of the story. Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yeah, we do, Jay.
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
We're focusing a little bit on safety this week, and and I'm going to talk about something that could be super bad. It could mess up your hunting season, and it's often not even focused upon. I must say that screw-in steps, like steps that you screw into the tree and climb up, man, they're bad news.
Why do you say that?
When I say bad news, I'm saying that if you get up there and you slip and fall, maybe your safety harness will catch you. But it's think if you hook one of them metal steps into your guts. What's it going to do, Jay?
It's going to rip it open.
It's going to tear your guts out.
Right.
You fall when you got metal steps screwed into the tree 4 or 5 inches. You fall on that, it's going to rip right through your clothes and get in your skin and literally rip your guts out.
Right.
People, you got to be careful with screw-in steps.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the force that might be coming down upon one of those things, and it's basically a spike. It's like a knife sticking out the side of the tree with a blunt end, and it'll tear you up.
For sure.
Yep.
Just be careful. If you're using screw-in steps, maybe get them on the back side of the tree in case something happens. But I tell you, if you ever fall and you got screw-in climbing steps, it's going to rip you up if you get hooked in them.
Might want to consider something else. Yep.
That's my Chubby Tines tip of the week, Jay.
Great tip. We love safety tips on the show to keep all of our diehard deer hunting fans safe and able to hunt next year. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you? Or you're not on the mic.
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Blueberry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.